everyone. So I turned 31 this month on October 26th, so I thought it would be a great idea to kind of sit down and reflect on my 31 books that kind of made me who I am today. The 31 books that turned me into the person and the reader that I am in present day. So these aren't necessarily like my top 31 books of all time that I'm obsessed with, but I do like all of these books and I do recommend them. But these are the 31 books, like when I sat down, I could pinpoint like, okay, this was, you know, this phase that I went through, or this is what got me into this genre, and this is what did this to me. Like, there are certain books that I can pick out that I feel like changed me. And you know, in present day, even looking back at last year, when I was 29 and turning 30, I like don't even know who that person is, and I feel like it's very obvious if you've been watching my channel that I've grown a lot this year, both as a person and as a book reviewer, I guess. Like, my taste has evolved so much. And so this is a video kind of exploring that and going over my thought process and what made me the weird girl, lit fic, sad girl, depressing, horror-loving, transgressive fiction reader that I am today. So I'm not gonna get super in depth with what each one of these books is about, because I am going to start from childhood and then work my way up to present day. But if you guys find any of them interesting, you could always look them up, whatever. But I just want to sit down and reflect and chit chat. So I want to start from the time that I was a child, like a teeny tiny little child in kindergarten, okay, reading my first books. And the first books that I can remember reading are Brown Bear, What Do You See? And then that caterpillar book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I don't know, these books slapped for some reason. As a child growing up in the 90s, I don't know. I honestly don't even know. When were these books published? I feel like they were published before that. I honestly have no idea, but I just remember these being like the books, you know, the books that everyone read as a child. So these are the books I remember loving. Then as I got a little bit older, first grade, second grade, etc., I remember loving, I was obsessed with, okay, everyone remembers them being the Berenstain Bears or the Berenstein Bears, right? And now they're the Berenstain Bears. I don't fucking know. It's some Mandela effect, but I was obsessed with them. I would make my dad buy all those books for me, and then he like took me to a meet and greet. There was some kind of event where the bears were, and I forced him to take me, and I met them in person. Obviously they were people in costumes, but I was obsessed. I also loved, like, when I first started reading on my own, sorry, my cat is in here and she's rubbing herself on the tripod. When I first started reading on my own, I remember loving the Junie B. Jones books, like where Junie B. Jones was going to school and creating chaos. I just feel like also the Berenstain Bears, the children in those books did the same thing. They all just like wreaked havoc and like caused all these incidents. And then it just makes me think like maybe I wasn't a troubled child because of my childhood trauma. Maybe it was just because of reading these books. But sometimes I would read Junie B. Jones and I was like, girl, where are your parents? Like, that girl belonged in like reform school. Then once again, getting a little older, we had like this little mini library at my school and they let us check books out, and I started getting into the horror books, like Goosebumps, for example. That's why I have a tin of Goosebumps books on top of my bookshelf, because it's like a little memory from my childhood, because I loved those books as a kid. And then I started getting into like scary stories to tell in the dark, and I just really loved horror from a young age. And I started watching horror movies from a really young age, and like those were the books that made me into like the creepy, spooky, weird person that I am today. And I think, you know, my birthday being October 26th and being someone who just kind of grew up loving Halloween and being so excited that it was my birthday and then Halloween around the same time, I think that just like made my childhood, because then I was obsessed with scary things, and I just remember loving those books so much. And then I got into Harry Potter around the same age, a little bit older. I started reading the Harry Potter books, and of course, you know, fuck J.K. Rowling, but these books just kind of brought me into another world where I could escape reality, escape my my childhood trauma, and put myself into this like fun world where I didn't have to think about all the other horrible things that were going on at the time, and I can just escape. And I think those books are so fun. I also loved the movies. I just grew up absolutely loving Harry Potter. It's just a shame that J.K. Rowling sucks. And a little bit older, in middle school, I started diving into almost more like sad girl problematic books. Like, you know those YA books that are a little bit like questionable? I loved Ellen Hopkins, is that her name? The author of Crank, that series. I read all of those books. I was obsessed with the Crank series. I loved reading about people doing meth and heroin. I don't know what it was, but I was obsessed. Just like the writing style, like the poetic writing, and like the drama. I was obsessed with these books about people that had real life problems, addiction issues, mental health issues. I loved the book Speak, which is about sexual assault. I actually think we had to read this for class, Speak. And then there's a movie based on it, and I think we had to watch the movie. It's all coming back to me now. I think we had to watch the movie and then write like a little essay on the differences between the book and the movie. But yeah, I just really started loving books about people with real life problems and people that were experiencing things that I was exposed to. And then similar theme here is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, and I just loved the letters in this one. And he also was suffering with CPTSD and possible borderline personality disorder. And so I think I just loved reading books like this as a child because it allowed me to explore some of the things and the feelings that I was experiencing as a young adult, and kind of helped me process and cope with those things. I really loved reading about other, you know, teenagers kind of going through the motions and going through some similar things as me and things that I was exposed to. So I just absolutely loved these like sad girl YA novels as a child. Then as a teenager, I loved Tuesdays with Morrie. This one is based on a true story, and you know, our character Morrie has ALS and he's about to pass away, and he's giving this reporter like all of his life lessons and things that he's learned and how he feels before passing away. And it was just so heartfelt and emotional, and once again, I just love these like sad grief books. I love the exploration of grief, and being someone who experienced grief at a very young age, at the age of 5, my mom passed away, and like I think sad books like this helped me process a lot. And then also moving into like my sad girl era, I loved John Green so much. I was like a little John Green fangirl as a kid. I loved Looking for Alaska. I thought the main character, well, yeah, the main female protagonist, Alaska, I think that was her name, right? I think she was so similar to me, and just like her personality and the thoughts of death and dying and depression. I just absolutely love this one. And then there's like a little love story wrapped up in there. I was a sad girl at heart, okay? I'm a sad girl through and through. And I love this book so much. I still own it, because it honestly just meant so much to me as a kid. So I kept it, and I still have it, and I still have The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I actually reread it the other month. Then in high school, you know, we had to read a couple books for my English class, which I didn't read a ton of them. If I'm being completely honest, I was someone that didn't do like a ton of my assignments, but the two books that I did read and loved are, no surprise, the first one is Brave New World. I just reread this one last month and once again gave it 5 stars. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I just realized that I love this sort of dystopian literature where we're exploring some scary things about society and how things could possibly look in the future. And this one was so spot on and accurate. And this one just really made me start thinking. Like, I started developing some critical thinking skills. I know it doesn't seem like I have any because I'm kind of an airhead, but they are there sometimes. And this English teacher specifically, like the books that he picked out for us to read, and then he made us analyze them, and it really made me sit and think and start picking apart what I'm reading and what the author's trying to say and symbolism and what things mean. And you know, I'm not a huge, I don't know, I'm not someone that loves analyzing literature. I've said that a million times on this channel, but books like this, I don't know, I had a really fun time reading this in high school, and I had a fun time rereading it as well and picking out things. And then a book similar to this one is 1984 by George Orwell, another one that I read in high school and had to, you know, pick apart and analyze. And I just loved this one also for a completely different reason. I don't think this one is as like spot on accurate if we compare it to today's society as Brave New World is, but this one, absolutely phenomenal. I love this one so much. Similar, you know, dystopian vibes, and this one is so depressing and bleak. Brave New World is more like happiness and everyone is drugged and woo, living their best life. They have no individuality. But then 1984 is like, oh no, bleak, depressing, disparity, like just yikes, okay? So I love these for different reasons, but they are similar books, and yeah, that's kind of what got me thinking more when it comes to reading. Then I kind of became, okay, so Instagram came out when I first graduated college, or graduated high school. I was probably 17, 18. I graduated when I was 17. So somewhere in there. So I was like a little Instagram girl. I still am. And I was taking pictures of the books that I was reading and posting them and posting little quotes from my books. And I was a poetry girly for a little while. I went through this phase where I was reading like very popular, like pretentious poetry. So an example is Milk and Honey. I don't know, I feel like every girl on the planet who was 18 was reading this book and posting it at the time, and I thought that I was so cool. Like, yeah, look at me, I read poetry, and I was posting it all the time. But just these sad girl poems about dealing with life. I don't know, I just thought that they were really relatable, so I went through this little poetry phase. And then after that, I went through a huge nonfiction phase. I was a nonfiction girly, okay? Getting a little personal for a sec, like I always knew deep down in my mind that I had endometriosis just from Googling things. And my symptoms got worse, you know, after graduating high school, and I noticed in my early 20s, my symptoms were starting to get worse. And I just knew that I had endometriosis. So I picked up the book Ask Me About My Uterus and read it, and it's a memoir, and I could so heavily relate to this. I was like, wow, this is me. I have endometriosis. Then I picked up the book Vagina Problems by Laura Parker. Same thing, read through it. It literally felt like I was reading my diary. I mean, these experiences that these women went through were so insanely similar to mine and helped me process like, okay, this is it. This is what I have. And I started going to doctors and had to go to a million doctors before they figured it out. And I'm so glad that I advocated for myself, because now I finally know the answer to why I've been the way that I am my entire life. And I honestly owe it to these two books specifically. And then I started, you know, diving into some more endometriosis based literature after my surgery and, you know, my diagnosis and everything. But these were the two books that I was like, yeah, these girls get me, you know? So it's nice to not feel alone. But then I was also reading a lot of nonfiction books about psychology and, you know, kind of like self-help books. I really loved law of attraction based books. So I read The Law of Attraction, and I really started trying to work on my mindset about certain things. And I was into manifestation, and I was one of those like girls, do you know what I mean? I was one of those like spiritual girls in my early 20s. I literally am wearing a crystal necklace right now. So I was one of those girls for a while. And yeah, I was reading so much nonfiction to the point where I'm surprised I'm not smarter, because I was reading books about like quantum physics. Imagine me doing that now. Woo! So after all of that, when I started getting surgeries for my endometriosis, so it was 2020 when I was finally diagnosed with endometriosis, and I started getting surgeries literally every year, and just nothing has been helping me. And in 2020, you know, after surgery and I was out of work for a few weeks, I started reading books, fiction books. Like I said, I was reading nonfiction for such a long time that I finally started reading some fiction, and that's when I started my YouTube channel shortly after that. So I got really, really into thrillers while I was out of work, and the first thriller I ever read and loved was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. I just loved the twists and the writing style, and this book just completely hooked me, and still to this day, Lisa Jewell's my favorite thriller author. I love her, and just, you know, her slow-paced books and the different POVs and how everything comes together in the end. I think she's an incredible writer. I just was absolutely hooked and entertained while I was dying of surgery pain. And another thriller that made me obsessed was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This one blew my freaking mind. I love this book so much, and how everything came together in the end, and I just loved the feeling of sitting there and taking my mind off of my crappy situation and trying to figure out like a mystery or something crazy, trying to figure out the twist. And, you know, of course I was horrible at figuring out twists at the time because it was the first time that I've read thrillers, but that's what got me into thrillers. And then I slowly started getting into horror. I read Misery by Stephen King, absolutely loved this one, and just that real life horror aspect where it's not about monsters or demons, it's about real life and just a crazy woman holding this man hostage. And this book just creeped me out because it was very realistic, and I knew from a young age that I loved, you know, just everything sinister, and I was obsessed with true crime podcasts and documentaries at the time, and I loved Misery by Stephen King so much when I read it. And then I started getting into books like The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix, and it really solidified my love for Grady Hendrix and just his ability to write horror and just like some horrible, like gruesome horror scenes, but also funny. His books really lean into horror comedy, but they also always have like a point and a plot and something heartfelt and like meaning and character development. His books are just amazing, and it really made me fall in love with him and his writing. And then I read Brother by Anya Alborn, and this was another realistic horror book where this family is abducting these women and torturing them. And it's not extreme horror, by the way, it's just general horror, but just the horrors of what our main character was going through, who had this guilty conscience and didn't want to do what his family was doing. And this book was very heartfelt to me at the time. I just felt gutted by what happened at the end. It was bleak and depressing, and I was like, wait, I fucking love this. And it's based on the movie Chained, is that the name of it? I don't know. That movie like fucked me up a little bit. I don't know what it is. I just love, love, love realistic, real life horror where humans are the monsters and humans do awful things on a daily basis. It just opened up this whole like portal in my brain where I was like, holy shit, the world is fucked up. But I love that book so much, and that's kind of what started my YouTube channel, because that's what kicked off me reading a ton of horror books when I first started YouTube. And then also, switching gears a little bit here with the sad girl books, I started my sad girl journey in my early 20s. I mean, we talked about when I was a teen, but I read A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. And this book was so sad and depressing and bleak and horrible, and I was traumatized when I read this book. I could not stop crying. It took me forever to read this book, but I was hooked, I was obsessed, and I realized that I just really, really love books exploring humanity and the awful traumas that happen in real life. And I just felt a deep connection to this book and how it made me feel. So that kind of kicked off my sad girl journey a little bit. And then switching gears again, I read my first extreme horror book on YouTube, which was Survivor by J.F. Gonzalez. And this book traumatized me when I read it because it's about snuff films. So again, this real life horror, but I started reading so many horror books that I was like, wait, these books aren't actually scaring me anymore. Like, this isn't scary, I'm just bored now. Like, give me the terrifying, horrifying subject matter, and this book did. So in this book, you know, once again, this is extreme horror, so it's very graphic, it's very disgusting, it's disturbing, it's violent. And I ended up absolutely loving this because it just explored the deeper, darker side of humanity, and I just loved the way that it was done and the scenes that were traumatizing. This book just like literally traumatized me, but also had a plot and a point, and like it kind of turned into a thriller halfway through. So this book was all over the place in the best way. I just absolutely love the way that this one was written, and this kind of led me into this phase of extreme horror splatterpunk, and this is what started that. So I went through this little phase, you know, where I was reading and filming a bunch of videos on extreme horror and splatterpunk and kind of getting my horror fix through those books because I was traumatized, and that's what I wanted from horror. It's almost like exposure therapy, like just exposing yourself to horrible, disgusting things so that way you're no longer terrified of them. Like, that's kind of how I felt. I don't know. It was almost like a therapy session for me. But then I quickly realized that I don't want to read books that are just about like gore and gross and like, oh, this guy's getting this thing shoved up his urethra. Like, I don't want to read books that are just gross for no reason. So then I read American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis, which you guys know is like my favorite book of all time. And this like changed my brain chemistry because I was like, wait, this book is disgusting and horrifying and terrible, but also funny. It's satire. I just love this book so much because it proves that you can write a well-written, structured book with tons of character development and satire and a plot, and have excellent writing, but also still have horrifying, disturbing, fucked up scenes in there that trigger you the exact same way that extreme horror would. I just kind of got tired of sifting through trash, so then I started reading more like transgressive fiction and satire, which leads me into Along the Path of Torment by Chandler Morrison, another one that is just full like satire but also horrifying at the same time, as we're, you know, exploring the sketchy side of Hollywood and just some like disgusting, triggering subject matter. And this is what made me realize, okay, I don't really love books that are just disgusting for no reason. I want to explore the shitty side of humanity and have those fucked up aspects without it being just about the gore, the violence, or whatever. Then, you know, leaning more into that transgressive fiction, I loved Invisible Monsters by Chuck Palahniuk. This is another one that kind of like changed my brain chemistry because when I read it, I was like, oh, I like this. I'm not sure how I felt. And then when I finished the book, I was like, wait, my mind is blown and I absolutely love this. I just loved the way that this one was written, kind of out of order. It was confusing in a way that completely made sense in the end. I just loved the way that this one was done, and I loved the character exploration of this one and also the reveals that took place. I think this one was so well written. This one made me realize like, okay, I need to go back to the basics. I need to read the books that I wanted to read as a child and never did because I'm clearly missing out on some gold here, okay? So I love this one. Then my last 3 books here, I started reading more sad girl lit fic this year. I have fully been in my lit fic era. I realized that I really love character-driven books, you know, especially thanks to Bret Easton Ellis for that. I realized that I could literally just sit and read books about absolutely nothing but just straight character development. So one book I wanted to mention is Adelaide by Genevieve Wheeler. So we're following this woman in this toxic relationship, and now she's out of the relationship and she's really depressed, and just following her journey and how, you know, her depression manifested throughout this relationship. And I went through something similar to this book, so this meant so much to me, and it made me realize like I just really love these deep dives into like sad women and like learning about their trauma and just learning about what makes them sad, and it almost helps me process my feelings and emotions and like why I have depression and why I have trauma, and you know, all these little things just add up in our lives. And I've been loving like exploring myself through these books and through the characters in these books. Another one would be Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter. This one just explored toxic work culture, which I know all about, and depression and feeling like there's this black hole that is following you and swallowing you up. And this one was just really, this one really got me because I felt like this one was extremely relatable. And then last but not least, The Pisces by Melissa Broder. This is another just weird, this is a weird girl book. But it's another kind of sad lit fic book where we're exploring this woman and her mental illness and dealing with, you know, her struggles with relationships, destroying her own life, destroying other people's lives because of her shitty mental health. And this one has some like, you know, mermaid smut, and there are some triggering things in this book for sure, but I just really realized that I love reading about horrible main characters, unlikable, toxic main characters, because I feel like they are relatable. They feel like real people. Not everyone is this like perfect cookie cutter person. So I just realized that I love just exploring these terrible characters. So yeah, that is it. Those were the 31 books that kind of turned me into the reader that I am in present day. If you liked any of these books, let me know in the comments down below, and let me know some books that made you the person that you are today. Love you guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.